Tilly dragged the box into the kitchen and peeled off the tape, which had turned crunchy with age. The noise of the bookshop melted away, and her hand drifted to the tiny gold bean necklace around her neck, a gift from her mother when Tilly was born, which matched the one Bee had won herself. Tilly's idea of her mum was stitched together from a patchwork of old photos and other people's memories. No one knew where Beatrice's pages had gone, and this lack of facts meant that her hole in her mother had left torn, ragged edges that were slow to knit back together. Tilly had almost given up asking, but when she did, conversations about Bee's disappearance always went the same way. "Love, we've told you everything we know, and what the police think. It's not good to dwell on what happened," one of her grandparents would say. "But the police think she was unhappy and left just to start again somewhere. I don't understand why she would have done that just after I was born if she—" Tilly found it hard to voice the end of that thought. The reassurance always came, "Tilly, she loved you very much. We know that with any doubt at all." "I just don't understand why she would leave if she loved me so much." Tilly couldn't help but come back to the same question she'd always asked, feeling the prick of tears as she spoke. "We don't understand either, Tilly, my love. We wish we did," Grandma would say, and Granddad, as always, would quickly wipe his eyes with his tartan handkerchief. Tilly pulled her mind back to the box in front of her. Inside were piles of old books, the paper yellowing and the covers tattered and ripped. Tilly stared at them, not sure where to start. But as she went to pull the top book, she heard Jack calling from the shop, "Tilly, vanilla! I'm smearing honey on your book as I speak." The bubble popped, and Tilly sighed and pushed the box to the side of the kitchen. She wanted to save it until she had uninterrupted time to look through it properly, the way she made sure she had time to savor a new book. She went back through Jack in the bookshop. "I couldn't find any vanilla. You should go ask Mary," Tilly said. "Well, go on then," Jack gestured impatiently. "Go and ask her." Tilly opened her mouth to make an excuse, wanting to return to the box of books. But the words weren't there, so she turned and grabbed the umbrella from the door, but skidded on something squishy underfoot. She looked down to see a half-eaten sandwich on the wooden floor. She tutted to herself as she picked it up. "Honestly, who eats marmalade sandwiches?" she said to herself as she threw it in the bin outside the shop and crossed the road to Crumbs, the cafe run by Mary Rue. Mary and Jack had a long-standing, mostly affectionate rivalry that was almost entirely one-sided. Mary was always lending Jack things he was missing and offering him baking tips. The bell above the door jangled as Tilly went in. She didn't spot Mary straight away, but she saw Oscar, Mary's son, sitting at a table toward the back. He was writing or doodling in a notebook, a slice of toast abandoned to one side, and Tilly couldn't help but notice his brown skin had inky fingerprints on it. A moment later, Mary's face appeared behind the counter. She was carrying a plate of cupcakes iced in pastel shades, which she handed to a couple and a happily gurgling baby. Mary grinned when she saw Tilly and beckoned her over once the family had sat down. "What can I help you with?" Mary asked. "Has Jack been experimenting again?" "He's trying to make pop cakes like the ones in the Enid Blyton books," Tilly explained. "But he's run out of vanilla and—" He wondered if he could have a little bit of yours, if you can spare some. Of course, Mary said. "Sit down. Let me grab some from the kitchen. Do you want lunch while you're here? Wait. You do look a bit peaky." "I'm okay," Tilly said. She looked up at Mary, testing how she felt about sharing the news about her box with her. "I just found some of my mum's old stuff. It's put me in a bit of a funny mood, I guess. I don't have that much that was hers." "Oh, love, I can see why that might have thrown you," Mary said before planting a kiss on the top of Tilly's head. Her hand rested on Tilly's shoulder a little longer than it usually did, and then Tilly felt a squeeze as Mary headed off to the kitchen. "Sit down. I'll be right back." As the door to the kitchen swung shut, Tilly looked at Oscar and tried to make eye contact. He didn't ever seem to be in Crumbs when Tilly was there, and he had gone to a different primary school, so although they shared some lessons, now they never really spoke much. She tried to wander over casually. "Have you started your English homework yet?" she asked. And Oscar looked up. "No," Oscar said in surprise. "It's literally the first day of the holidays. But we have to read a book by an author we've never read before, right?" "Yep," Tilly said happily. "Best homework ever." I was thinking I might come and find something at Page and Company later, maybe. If that's okay, he said. Tilly beamed. That'd be great. I can help you find something if you want. What do you like to read? Oscar scuffed his feet together and looked down at the table. All sorts. I started reading the first Percy Jackson book in the summer holiday, and I'm really enjoying it. They're so good, right? Tilly said. I could not believe it when I found out who Nico's dad was. Don't tell me, Oscar said. I haven't got to that bit yet. I'm still on the first one. I read kind of slowly. Oscar's dyslexic, Mary said, coming up behind them, a small bottle in one hand and a brown envelope tucked under her arm. But he loves reading. Don't you, my love? All right, Mom, Oscar said, brushing his mum's hand off his head in embarrassment. Right, well, you should definitely come over to the shop for your homework book, though, Tilly said. Yes, thank you, Tilly. That would be lovely. Why don't you pop round, Oscar? Mary said, smiling widely. All right, Mom, chill out, okay? Oscar said. He turned to Tilly. I'll come around tomorrow? Tilly nodded. Oh, and there's a reason you've come, Mary said, holding a tiny bottle of vanilla essence. Could you let Jack? No, I don't need it back as long as I can try one of his pop cakes. She grinned before putting the envelope down on the table between them, pushing it toward Tilly, who looked at her quizzically. When you told me about your mum's books, it made me think of this, she said slowly. I've had it for ages. I should have given it to you sooner, but, well, when Bee left, I tucked it away and it just slipped my mind until you mentioned finding her things. Neither Tilly, Mary, nor Oscar seemed sure what to say or do next, so Mary pulled the envelope back toward her and slid out a slightly faded photograph that showed Bee and Mary as young women on a sofa in the shop. They sat at either end with their socked feet touching in the middle, and both of them had books resting on top of their heavily pregnant bellies. Mary's hair was in an afro, rather than braids Tilly was used to seeing, and her own mum had long auburn hair spread over the back of the sofa. I'm sorry I haven't taken better care of it, Tilly, Mary said, as she tried to rub away a smear from the corner of the picture. But it's yours now, if you want it. I know it's only one photo, but I thought you might like it anyway. I can tell you a bit more about it if you like, but I understand if you'd rather look properly by yourself first. I can picture that day perfectly. I haven't the foggiest what book I was reading, but your mum went on a real classics binge while she was pregnant. Nostalgic for her own childhood, I suppose. That book is The Little Prince. She read it over and over. It was her favorite. I thought for sure, although I'm sure you know that, you can come and ask me about the photo or your mum any time you like, you know. Thank you, Tilly said quietly, staring at the photo. That was the first time she heard A Little Prince was her mum's favorite book. Mary slid the picture back in the envelope and passed it to Tilly. Go on, get back to Jack and make sure to bring me over a pop cake later. Mary gave a gentle push toward the door. And keep that envelope out of the rain. After dropping the vanilla off at Jack, Tilly went back into the kitchen to find Granddad sitting on the floor, leaning against the wall next to the box with his hanky out. Tilly slid down to the wall next to him and squeezed under his arm, breathing in his familiar smell of cashmere, jumpers, and old paper. I'd forgotten where I'd put these, he said, hugging Tilly close to him. There were some of your mum's books when she was your age. She'd be rereading a lot of them when she was pregnant with you. These were her favorites? Tilly prompted, eager for more details. Yes, well, her favorites when she was growing up. These were ones that meant a lot to her when she was around your age. The books we love when we're growing up shape us in a special way, Tilly. The characters in the books we read help us decide who we want to be. Granddad paused, and Tilly noticed he had a book in his hands, turning it round and round as he spoke. Ah, this one, he said. I wasn't sure whether to show you, well, just let me know what you think of it. He gave a last glance at the book in his hand to pass it to Tilly. It was The Little Princess, a copy with a yellow cover. Tilly took Mary's photo out of the envelope and showed it to Granddad. Where did you get this from? He asked. Mary just gave it to me, Tilly said. Look, she's reading this exact book. You see, it was her favorite, Granddad said. She enjoyed it when she was your age, but she really fell in love with it while she was in university. She took this copy with her and read it over and over again. She found something new in it as an adult, I suppose. Have you read it? Yes, a few times. What did you think? Granddad asked. Did you connect with any characters in particular? Tilly shrugged. I enjoyed it. It's not my favorite, but I liked Sarah a lot. I know I like how she tells stories when she feels sad and to help her after her dad dies. Granddad smiled softly, as much to himself as to Tilly. Well, now you have your mum's copy to keep, and a photo of her reading it. He looked at the box of books. There might be some in here you haven't read before. Why don't you go and take some of them up to your room and have a sort through? He gave Tilly a squeeze and hauled himself up off the floor. Can't leave your grandma to deal with Jack by herself for too long, he said, and headed back to the bookshop. Tilly put a little princess back in the box and staggered upstairs with it to her tiny room at the very top of the house. The walls were lined with bookshelves full of her own books, as well as one she had temporarily borrowed from the shop, something she was not really supposed to do. But after she got Grandma spilling tea on what turned out to be a shop book, a blind eye was usually turned as long as they reappeared in pristine condition. Tilly put the box down in the middle of the floor and placed Mary's envelope on top. She sat down on her bed, curled her knees up underneath her, and stared at them as their feelings tangled around each other, twisting and knotting her up. Finally, she pulled out the photo again and laid it on her bed before slipping a narrow album off her shelves. In the pages were a collection of photos her grandparents had let her collect that were all featured her mom as her child, and Grandma and Granddad in the bookshop, even some in New York, where she had gone to university. The photos looked back at Tilly, a puddle of memories that weren't hers. Tilly felt like she was wrapped in a heavy blanket that was comforting and suffocating all at the same time. Her mom's face looked up at her from too many photos all at once. When Tilly tried to picture her mom in her mind, she felt like she was trying to imagine what a character in a book looked like. Yes, you think they're standing right next to you, but as soon as you whirl around to look straight at them, everything blurs and dissolves. And the harder you try to see them, the more flighty and unfocused they get until they barely resemble a real person at all. She tried to calm her breathing down and tucked Mary's photo into the albums before putting it on her bedside table. Then she took a deep breath and settled down to look at the box of books instead, which felt more manageable. Books are my thing, she muttered to herself. I can do books. She tried to blow the dust off the top box, but it worked rather less well than it did in films, so she wiped it off with her sleeve. There wasn't any other writing on the box apart from her mom's name in blocky capitals. Tilly peeled the back of the rest of the barely sticky tape and pulled out the copy of A Little Princess. Underneath was a dated-looking version of Anne of Green Gables, which she had picked up, but she found herself just gazing at the cover, unable to open it. The top corner was ripped off, and she could just see Beatrice Pages written on the first page in child's handwriting. Tilly traced the lines of her mother's writing with her fingertip, trying to picture her mom at her age, carefully inking a little bit of herself onto the paper. Tilly felt as though there was a delicate thread stretched between her and her mother that she had only realized was there when this book had tugged on it. Granddad had always told her to write her name in books, so it shouldn't have come as a surprise that her mom did the same thing when she was little. It's about creating a record of who's read and loved each book, he would say. Granddad always hunting in charity shops for books that had someone's name in it, or messages from people who had given books as presents. I love thinking about other people reading the books I love, or why someone gave the book as a present. Those names and messages are like tiny moments of time travel linking readers from different eras and families, and even countries. Tilly wondered why her mother had cared for these books, for they were clearly well loved. Tilly wanted to know if her mother had loved these characters for the same reason she did. Had Anne Shirley made her mom laugh in the same places? She closed her eyes and imagined a parallel life where she could ask her She could go downstairs and find her at the kitchen table, chopping salad leaves with Granddad, or rubbing flour and butter together to make crumbled topping with Grandma. Their house was always full of laughter and music and conversation, but Tilly could hear the silence where her mother should be, like an orchestra without a cello section.